Hello everyone, my name is Kristen Olson and I just completed this beautiful impressionist garden painting. This is a really special piece with sunlight pouring in through the trees from the back, and it has a cool foreground, making it a really unique garden landscape. Please take a minute to like this video and subscribe to my channel and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Hello everyone, welcome to my studio. Today we're going to paint this beautiful garden path. If you compare the reference photo to my drawing, you'll see that instead of drawing the path straight, I made it meander a little bit. So I widened it at the foreground just slightly, and I've got a lot of plants overlapping, and then it's going to veer over to the right, go up here a little bit, veer over to the left, and then straight back to the little garden structure. So I did this because I feel like it's a beautiful reference photo, but the path is just too straight and direct, and whenever I look at the reference photo, I go straight to the house and I feel like I miss all these flowers. So I want to change the speed of eye movement and slow it down so that the painting is going to be more about all the flowers in the garden, the greenery, the leaves, and things like that, and much less about the structure, which is going to be very much more in the background. The other thing about this painting is that it shows evening light, sort of looks like sunset light, and it's sort of an orange, like a very light orange glow behind the trees. So this is a very different garden painting from any others that I've demonstrated, mostly because of the time of day. So if you'll notice, the light on the flowers and greenery in the foreground is all very cool. Even though some of the greens are warm greens, there's definitely a feeling of cool light, and it gets warmer as you go in the distance. So typically in a daytime painting, you have warmer colors in the foreground, cooler colors in the background. But in this one, it's going to be the reverse. So that'll be interesting as well. So I'm going to start with some of the greenery, and all the colors are listed in my description. So I'm not going to go through my whole palette today. I'm going to be mixing this pastel green with permanent green deep, which gives me a pretty nice cool green, not quite teal. And if you'll notice too, in the reference photo, there's a lot of separation of greens in the photo. In other words, there's a lot of very yellow greens and a lot of very blue greens in the photo, and they're separated. So I want to make sure that I keep that separation in my painting, because otherwise it'll look too jumbled and monotonous. So I want to have the green really define bigger color shapes. Most of the flowers are very small, so they're going to add more to the texture of the painting, whereas the greenery is going to end up defining the color shapes. So shapes are, in a painting like this where you have a lot of random things going on, shapes, interlocking shapes specifically, are really the groundwork and the foundation of the painting. I'm going to bring some of this color over here as well. So notice how I'm pushing my knife up and over, lower right, or excuse me, upper right to lower left, and really working the paint into the canvas. Now I'm going to add some blue and some titanium white. I got a little too much blue, so I'm going to take some of that over here and lighten it. So there's a very light bluish green bush that kind of looks like some variety of eucalyptus, although I don't think that's what it is. But it's a very pretty color. So notice how most of my greens so far are pastel and cool. Now I'm going to mix some of this Persian rose in with my blue color and work that in over here. So as you can see, and as usual, I'm using this reference photo as inspiration, and I'm not adhering to it too strictly as far as the drawing. I've adjusted the path and the colors, but I chose it because I love the feeling that I get looking at this garden path. It just makes me want to take a wander. So this is the rose with some of the blue mixed in with it. Just want to sort of obscure that background a little bit, that background shed. So this color is called burnt carmine. It's a little bit like a combination of alizarin crimson and perhaps transparent oxide red and a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm letting you know that because probably most of you don't have it, but it's a new color by Cobra, Rembrandt or Royal Talons Cobra paints. And these are the water mixable oil paints. And it's similar to another color that they have in traditional Rembrandt paints. In other words, the paints that are not water mixable. And that color is called Caput Mortem Violet. So Caput Mortem Violet, I don't believe is available in Cobra paints, but they have this color burnt carmine, which is very similar. I would say slightly more transparent. Caput Mortem Violet is maybe a bit more earthy, so more of an earth color, whereas this is more of a transparent violet. But it's a great color, and it's very easy to use in darks in your painting, because if you were to use just burnt sienna, for instance, it might get a bit murky when you mix greens with it. But if you mix greens, especially cool greens and violets, with a color that's more of a crimson or a violet color, but not too much of a violet, I would say one that has more red tones in it, it will blend better with your greenery. So I just squeezed out a little more of this color. I'm going to mix it with some Persian rose and some Cad Red Light. Cad Red Light is so strong. Okay, there's a little more of the burnt carmine mixed with it. And I'm going to use that for this beautiful maple tree. I think it's a maple tree in the distance here. And again, this isn't, I'm not adding any details right now. I'm just getting in my big shapes. And my intent is to get some big interlocking shapes established. And once I'm happy with the look and feel of those, then I'm going to go in and start adding detail. I'm going to put a little more of this color just along the edge of the path. And also in this corner here. Sometimes if I just want a thin coat of it, I'll just use the finger, one of my fingers in my glove, and just sort of rub the color into the canvas. Just kind of pushing in and filling in those white spaces. Okay. Now I'm going to mix some more of this permanent green deep and some cadmium lemon. So cadmium lemon is a cooler lemon, or excuse me, a cooler yellow. So that's why I chose that color, yellow, over cadmium yellow medium and cadmium yellow deep, which are the other two yellows that I have on my palette. And I'm going to mix now, as I'm moving towards the back, I'm going to mix some cadmium yellow medium in with this green mixture to create a really warm yellowy green. And I'm going to put that right next to that very cool blue. So those temperatures can accentuate each other. It's really nice to put warm colors next to cool colors. It starts to give your painting a little bit of a vibration. Maybe that's where the term vibrant colors comes from. Okay, so here's an even warmer green. Now I'm going to mix a deeper blue-green with, this is Cobalt Blue Ultramarine and Permanent Green Deep. I'm going to put that back here. You can see I'm blending it right into that burnt carmine. And I will be getting to the path soon, but I just wanted to get some of these green shapes established. Now I'm going to mix Persian Rose, Permanent Red Violet Light with a little bit of Persian Rose and some of this Cadmium Red Light. I'm going to get that worked in here to this tree, just to add some cooler edges to the shape. Now above the tree, I'm going to add some cadmium yellow deep and mix it with this sort of burnt orange color. Put that up here. So we'll be cutting out some sky holes, but look how pretty these colors look together, this cool violet and this sort of hot orange color. But I will be cutting out sky holes into those shapes later. I mixed up a nice gray and I used Persian Rose and Naples Yellow Deep plus titanium white, and I just wanted to have a nice neutral cool color to establish the path. And then over the path I'll be putting beautiful shades of greenery and flowers and just nice plants just sort of overlapping the path. I like to have a path in the painting, but I always like to have it obstructed somewhat. I don't ever like to have them too straight, and I like them to be a little bit mysterious. And if they're somewhat obstructed, then they usually look mysterious. So I'll just bring this color here. So there's our path. Okay, so now get this color out of the way, and I'm going to start mixing up another batch of this deep carmine, burnt carmine, warming it up a bit with this orange color and putting that in the upper right hand corner. And in this section again, I'll be cutting out some sky holes. If you look at the reference photo, you'll see lots of sections where just beautiful warm orange glowy sky poking through. Now in between these two reddish maple trees, there's a beautiful green tree. It almost has the same color as a willow tree. I'm not sure if it's a willow tree. But I've mixed permanent green deep with Naples yellow deep, and I'm going to add some cadmium yellow deep to that as well. And I want to make a nice, warm, but slightly earthy green color to put in the center here. So the same thing for this shape. I'll be cutting out the sky holes later on. And I'm painting around my structure. Now I want to smooth this paint out. I've got it a little too streaky. And I'm going to put a few strokes of that right into the surrounding shapes. Now I'm trying to hold my palette knife and touch very lightly, so I just sort of smooth over the top surface of those outer colors without disturbing them too much. So I'm just going to spread the screen around here and there. This is wet on wet painting, so I'm spreading strokes of this color over the underlying colors, sort of integrating the shapes and making the trees look like they're just naturally growing together. Now I'm going to put another green shape on the right side with some cadmium yellow medium and permanent green deep. And I'm going to add some Naples yellow because even though it's a warm color, it's in the background, and I want to tone it down just slightly. So I'm going to take some of that color and smooth it over this beautiful blue. Now I'm going to make a few colors for this right side in the foreground. So I'm going to use permanent green deep, cadmium yellow medium, a little cadmium yellow deep, and once we get the whole canvas covered, that's when we can really start having fun, adding flowers and leaf details. See how beautifully this burnt carmine mixture goes with the green? It just looks very natural. It's the perfect color to have as an undertone for all this pretty greenery. Now I'm going to go back to this pastel green, mix that in with a little bit of the other color I have left, and add a little yellow to it. And that'll be a nice color shape for this section. Now I'm going to go back to a more bluish green, because on the far right side it looks very bluish to me. Very cool. I think that's what's so inviting about this scene, is because it looks so cool. It just looks like you could just take a walk down this path and smell the flowers and just feel the coolness of the air. So you can see that this undertone also works really well with this pastel blue shade. Kind of hints at violet. I'm going to take some of that color and add that here. I like how the violet has mixed in with it. And then I want a deeper, darker green right next to it. So I just blocked in this house in the background with some ivory black and a little bit of cadmium yellow deep. And I'll add some more definition later. But anyway, there it is for now. Next, I'm going to start adding some flowers, followed by some greenery. So I'm going to start with the beautiful yellow flowers on the right side. So I'm going to use cadmium yellow deep and some titanium white. And I got a little bit of pink mixed up there. This is a small palette that I use for demonstrations, and sometimes I ding my other colors, but that's okay because this color looks great. Okay, so I'm going to push this over, and I'm going to make horizontal strokes, just kind of blocking in this shape of flowers. And then I'm going to go over these bigger strokes with some smaller detail strokes of a slightly lighter yellow, and that will make them look three-dimensional. I'm going to bring some of that yellow down here. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in this cadmium lemon and mix it into this yellow mixture. And I'm going to make these small strokes within the larger yellow strokes. And I'm putting the ones that are at the top, I'm putting a brighter yellow at the top of the shape. Now I'm going to put some of that same yellow on the other side because I want to have balance. But I'm just going to put a few small strokes of it over here. Won't be quite as big a shape of them. Now I'm going to take some cadmium red light by itself and put that right here. And also I'm going to put a few small strokes of it here because these are going to be the pink daisies that have deep red centers. So notice how my flower shapes are not contained within the shapes of green. They're overlapping So the reds are over the deep blue, but they're also over the light blue and the green. That gives my painting a very nice, light, airy feeling, which is what I love in garden paintings. So get those out of the way. Now I'm going to use some of this cadmium lemon with some titanium white. And I'm going to put that cascading over the structure. So notice how I'm moving from foreground to background. I never like to finish any one section of the painting at once. I find that if I paint that way, because I have, my paintings don't look as cohesive. So I like to try to work on the whole thing at once, and this goes for big paintings as well. Now I'm going to use some cadmium yellow deep and some cadmium red light. Make a nice rich orange. You could use cadmium orange or pyro orange. Put some of those colors down here overlapping the path and have them on both sides. And one more place I'm going to put that color is a bit closer to the background. I'm going to mix some titanium white with it. I want to put some back here where I'm going to be cutting out sky holes and bring some of that beautiful golden light color coming from the sky down into my painting. So pretty. Now I'm going to mix some permanent red violet light with titanium white and start working on some of these pretty pink flowers. So I'm going to start with the ones in the background here. Notice how I'm going from the left side to the right side of the path. I'm going to put a few down here also. And none of these flowers are too defined yet. So I'm working from bigger shapes to spots of color, and then later I'll be adding detail. Now I'm going to use some permanent Persian rose. So Persian rose is a lighter pink even than permanent red violet light mixed with white. Really want to obscure that structure. I'm going to put some of this beautiful Persian rose on top of this blue, but of course I'm letting the blue show through. Now I'm going to work on some of the petals of the daisies in the foreground. So I'm going to mix some white with the permanent red violet light. So permanent red violet is also similar to primary magenta or quinacridone rose, but it's more purple than quinacridone rose. So I'm just making the petal shapes around those red centers. Trying to keep my colors clean I got a little bit of yellow mixed in. Now for the permanent red violet light by itself. I love using colors straight out of the tube. When I was in art school, that was a no-no. Every color had to be mixed. But we were also learning how to mix colors. But it's so fast and fun to paint with colors straight out of the tube. It's very freeing. If you haven't done it, I recommend trying it. Just a couple more pink flowers. There. So I've mixed up a beautiful yellowy green, and I'm going to start making leaf shapes. And the leaves are going to cascade over onto the path. Going for both sides here. Now I'm going to add some white to this mixture so I can make some of the leaves on the top lighter. Moving all around the painting, adding small leaves. Now I'm going to mix some more yellow in with this green color and some white. And make some green leaves into this shape. And I'm going to mix some more white, and now I'm going to use the side of my knife to make some long skinny strokes to indicate tall leaves and stems. So this is where the painting starts to get a lot more complicated and where people tend to get stuck. And you kind of keep wondering, where do I go next? And I think the best way to explain it is you kind of have to just paint by feel. And I think it's a good idea to try to paint faster at this stage because it allows you to paint more intuitively when you paint faster. And it sounds counterintuitive to say that it's more intuitive to paint faster, but I think paintings that are painted with too much thought don't have as much feeling, and paintings that are painted more intuitively have more feeling. And feeling is what resonates more with people who are looking at art more than thought. At least for this style of painting, that's just been what I've found. So now I've jumped to this brighter, cooler green, this pastel green. That's one of my favorite new colors. And I'm going to go back and forth with some flower colors. I want to make a pretty violet now, so I'm going to use this Cobalt Blue Ultramarine and Permanent Red Violet Light. And also some white. There's a lot of pretty purple flowers, really small ones, but they're sort of clustered together in here. And I need a violet that's definitely not too pink because there's already a lot of pink. So putting the violet all over the place. And that's working really well. So now back to the green. I'm gonna get some permanent green, deep, and cadmium yellow medium. It's definitely one of my favorite mixtures for green paint, for foliage, I should say, not for green paint. And I pulled that down into the corner here. And I'm trying to make these leaves look like they're coming up and over, up and over. Now I'm going to use permanent green deep and ultramarine, cobalt blue ultramarine, and make a nice teal green. And I want to give some definition to this pretty bush back here that I said I think might be eucalyptus, but can't be sure. And I'm going to pull some of that green down into the front section of the painting as well. Now I've mixed titanium white and Persian rose. So I've got a very, very light, soft pink. And I'm gonna put some little white flowers here and there. So I didn't use titanium white by itself, but rather this mixture where they're mixed with pink, because the titanium white by itself would be too bright and wouldn't fit in with any of the natural looking colors in this painting. So I'm going to make some tall, spiky ones too. Now I've mixed up some titanium white with cadmium yellow deep, and I want to start carving out some of the sky holes in the background. So I'm going to start with this color, and then I'm going to come back in to the interior of that light shape with some even lighter whites, but they'll still be tinted whites. So just carving out some nice sky holes. When you do this, when you're working on something in the background and you're close to your painting, it really helps to sort of squint down, kind of stop for a minute and look through your eyelashes and see how the shapes are looking, to see if they're reading as being in the distance. And for the case of this painting, to make sure that they're really capturing that sense of the light coming in from behind. So the sky holes in this lighter green tree are a little bit darker than the sky holes in the darker tree. That's just the information I'm getting from the reference photo. Now to emphasize this light, I'm going to emphasize the dark of this maple tree with a few strokes of ultramarine and burnt carmine. Just kind of darken that up a little bit. Same for this tree. I want to make sure my painting has the full range of values. So this is not black, but it's pretty close to black. And I'll put a couple of those strokes into the structure. just to sort of carry that dark through the painting. And now I'm going to put a little bit of that dark down in the foreground here because there's a plant that has sort of violet and dark leaves. Such a nice variety of plants and colors in this garden. I just love it. So I'm going to add a few lighter strokes to my path with Naples Yellow Deep and Titanium White. And I'm going to just put a few strokes. This color needs to be perfectly mixed though, onto the path here, just to kind of give it some texture. Have to be very careful going in between these flowers because it's so easy to bump your knife in them and pick up colors that you don't really intend to be on the path. Now I've mixed up some titanium white and cadmium lemon for a very, very light yellow. And I just want to add a few highlights to sort of show that excuse me, the light coming from the background and spilling out onto the garden and just sort of catching the light on a few of the tops of the leaves. I'm going to push my palette over again. So I'm going to make sure in the foreground that the highlights are made with strokes of paint that are going in different directions. So when you paint wet on wet with a light color, you'll find that very often you need to go back in and get some more white and keep mixing it in with your color, because as you pick up little bits of paint in other parts of the painting, it darkens the color that you're going back into and mixing with. So add a few highlights on this side as well. So when you paint, usually in oil, you start out with fairly dark colors first, and you build into midtones. And I find that's where people get stuck, was with the midtones. And then eventually you need to start adding highlights, and usually you need to add some darks back into the painting. And that's also the time when it's so easy to overdo it, because if you add too many lights, then everything looks too pastel. So I'm mixing a lighter green now, greenish yellow, and I'm going to just put a few highlights like a plant. There's one in the reference photo that's kind of popping up over that dark. That's very pretty. And bring some of that warmth in. Now I'm going to mix some lemon yellow with this white. So I'm making some nice streaks of long leaves. And I've got a nice bunch of that yellow clustered right here. And at this point, I'm just kind of finishing the painting, sort of feeling my way around. This area looks very unfinished. So I'm going to definitely go in there with some more darker greens. And then some lighter greens and yellows over that. I'm going to be adding a few darks in, and this time I'm going to do some blending. So I'm not just putting pops of paint on, but I'm blending a little bit into the paint that's there. So I'm just darkening some of those greens. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. And the color that I'm using to mix in and darken is the Cobalt Blue Ultramarine mixed with Burnt Carmine. I feel like my painting got a little too unstructured. And these garden paintings are, you know, they're that balance of structure and non-structure. So you have to be able to recognize when you look at your painting and you can't focus on any one specific thing, then you might need to add a little structure. And that structure very often comes from just a little bit of blending and reintroducing some darks here and there. So this now looks more structured to me. I'm going to add some darks on the right side as well. And I don't want each side to be even in terms of value, but I want them to look equally finished. So when I build darks back into a painting, especially in a vertical composition, I think about that up and down flow and trying to make sure that I do have verticals throughout the painting in a top to bottom or bottom to top manner. So this tree in the background here, just darkening the underside of it by blending some of this blue mixture into it. Now I'm going to put in those lighter tree trunks by mixing white with titanium, titanium white with some of the yellow and some pink. Just kind of want to make a nice neutral light gray. And I'm going to very gently, oh, it's not light enough, pull that color down through the greenery to show the trunk of this tree. I'm going to introduce some dark in between these light areas in the background. Now I'm going to add a dark violet, but not as dark as the darkest color that I've had here, but just to give a little bit of shadowing on the path. So this softens the contrast between the light color in the path and the dark shadow colors that are underneath. So it's a value that's in between those two. I'm going to mix some cadmium yellow deep with cadmium yellow medium. I'm going to add a little more deeper, richer yellow to where these yellow flowers are. I'm even going to bring some of the shapes together. Oh, I really like that. That looks great. And I'm going to put some of that over here, but smaller. I felt like it needed that warmth, that the yellow was a little too, didn't have quite enough yellow in the color. It was a little too gray. Adding a little deeper blue back in this section of the painting. Softening the edges of that dark. And I'm going to add a few tree branches and a tree trunk. And some more of this violet color here. And now I'm going to go with this color. This is called Rose. And I'm going to just brighten these daisies with this warmer, brighter pink, again straight out of the tube color. That looks great. And I'm going to put some of that back here as well, but in a much looser way with more horizontal movement. And I'm going to mix some titanium white with that same pink color to highlight these pink flowers. So I finished up the painting, and I added just a couple of extra strokes of very light blue on the bottom of the path, and I added some of that lighter yellowish white into the sky holes in the background, and a little extra red also. If you can see that bright red patch of flowers, I emphasized that with a little extra cadmium red light. So I hope you enjoyed this painting video and learned about impressionist garden painting. If you haven't already done so, please take a minute to like this video and subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you.